Hello, welcome back. This is projectile Dev back with another Game Jam video, and this is the Yogscast Game Jam 2020. This is the second day that we'll be covering, and this is going to be finishing the whole thing, and we'll be continuing pretty much where we left off. So let's get straight into it. So back with the rounds, what we're going to do is we're going to look at presents now. So present spawning, it's just going to be a simple array script which will choose a random game object within an array to appear and spawn. And then we'll put this spawn on our specific present spawn point game object. We'll put all our different presents in the array so it'll choose a random present to spawn, which these are all just part of a free game pack that I got, that I've downloaded on Unity for free for Christmas. And then we add our random rotation and random size scripts on, make sure that they are correct. And this will just add a little bit of variation to the presents, even more so than what we've already got. Make sure they're working, spawn them, and as you can see, a script has spawned at that a present has spawned at that specific point, so it's working. We also added a collider as well, because we didn't want it to fall through, and we also added a rigid body to it. So there we go. We've got our specific spawn point that's going to be in an empty game object, just to keep things organised. Turn it into a prefab, the spawn point, and then what we're going to do is we're actually going to add it to our polybrush. So just as we did with the trees, spawning those, we're going to do the same thing with the presents. So here I am, just adding them. I added a block to the actual spawn point as well, just so I can see where exactly I've placed them throughout the map. So there you go. I can get rid of those later, the mesh. That's fine. So there we go, it's spawned in. Now, quick mention that the reason why it looks like it's gone back a bit is actually because I had a few issues with the current map and I had to redo the whole thing. I had to do the whole of the map again. So I'm back up to the point now where I'm spawning trees in, and in a minute I'll be spawning presents back in. But basically, yeah, I lost all that progress from a weird polybrush bug which broke the whole map and all the mesh and all of the spawning. But basically I got up to date, and then I decided to add in some snow. Of course I want some snow falling. And so I just used some particle effects. I kind of skip over this because I've shown the particle system before, and this is just some simple snow. Once that's done, I add in the presents again. And again, this is an updated version of the map. I try to keep it as similar as it was, but ultimately it is still slightly different. And there you go, I'm now trying to click on presents. Okay, so now, as you can see, what we're doing is I brought in some mountains, because we'd already brought in these mounts from if you remember the corrupting spring enhanced. I created some of these models, brought them into this just to add to the environment and add to the back. And then what I want to do is I want to create a new script which is called close present. This is how we're going to figure out which present is closest to us. You can pause the video. This is the script. I've gone over it in corrupting spring enhanced already, so I'm not going to cover it again. But basically, we're going to this will allow us to see which present is closest to the player, and then we can interact with it and open them and see if there's a player hiding or hide in one. So this is really going to be the core script that will control whether we can go into these presents and open them. So as you can see, I put it on. On the right, you can see that we've found the closest present to us, and now we need to be able to interact with it. So I need to get a reference to that script, the close present, again, so we can actually use it in our script of our player movement and be able to interact with it and open it. So after I've discovered where the present is, I then determine what the distance is, and if they're in a certain amount of distance and you click a specific button, you should then be able to open it. I also introduced a icon, which is a red circle, blue circle, you just saw it. That'll help us to determine if we're close enough to it or not. I add in a bit of a boolean just so we're not causing any issues where we might be, overlapping issues, and make sure that you can't just open continuously or close in continuous presence. I also make it so the player can't jump and they can't move while they're inside a present, and I make sure the body disappears when they interact with the present. So this is a hider. Go into a present, can press, I can't remember which button it was, but press the button, then the body disappears and they can't move and they've got to wait. Then what we're going to do is we're going to make the timer speed up to 5 seconds. Once they've hidden, they might as well start the next round of seeking, because there's no point in having the seeker then wait however much time they have to. So there we go, the hider then hides in the present and it switches to the seeker, and So now the hiding aspect of the game is now working. So now we're going to be moving on to the seeker in a second. But what I'm doing here is I'm just determining if the hider is less than 0, then we want it to be able to go to the main menu as a temporary fix of whether the hider is lost, essentially. Okay, and now what we're going to do is we're actually going to sort out the screens, so the lose screens and the win screens. So we want to make it so that instead of the menu, I decided to might as well get this over with straight away, is I put a toy lose screen if they don't manage to hide in time. This is just going to be some text on the screen with blacked out. Very simple, very straightforward. You did not hide in time. This will appear, like I said, if they didn't hide in the amount of time that they were supposed to. And there you go, did not hide in time. Okay, so what I'm also doing is I'm now going to hide and then see if it still comes up, which it didn't, which is exactly what we want. And I want to do the same thing for our seeking. So now we're going to introduce our seeking aspect. We're also got an is seeking bool, same as an is hiding bool, because we want to be able to know when we're exactly hiding and seeking, and it'll help us to control different elements later. So then we add in our player body. We want to be able to know that if we're close enough to the first player, our player 1 who's hidden, then we should be able to open the present using the same close present that we already had. And once we're close to a present and we're in range of the player, then we can open the present and the player will be able to run. Then we also want to add in a little bit of a fail for the second player, the child. If they couldn't find the present in time of the player that was hidden, then they fail, and of course the other player wins. So with that fixed, let's try it out. So there we go, our player can come into our present, hide, and now it's up to the seeker to go and find it. So they can also open these presents, as you can see, and then they can go to it. You can also see the icon appearing, and then we found our player right now. So there we go, we've managed to do it in time. And here it is again in a little bit of a bigger screen, I think a little bit more time as well. Now we add in a couple more screens of winning and losing, because we want to be able to make it so that when the player does find them, if the player wins that section where they're hiding, then it'll come up with them winning and the other player losing. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're actually going to look at player's health. So I want the second player, which is the child, to be able to attack and stop the toy, which is the player 1, once they've discovered them. So this is part of the hunting phase, and we want to be able to do this by just having a simple, this is kind of how I've done it in Corrupting Spring Enhanced, so check that out. But basically I just create a projectile, a very simple object that's kind of using one of the bauble game objects meshes that we used before. Simple object with some collision rigid body, and what it's going to do is it has a specific tag, and if that tag is hit, if that player is hit with that tag, then they'll take damage. What I'm doing there is I'm just adding a couple more screens in for when the toy has managed to escape and wins, or if the player 2 has managed to win and has killed the player. So I'm just also adding in some timescale equaling 0, which stops the game, which pauses, and we're going to have that when these screens come up. And I add in a couple of buttons here so that they can restart and retry it, or just go to the menu. So I'll do that for all these different screens, as you can see, and then we test it out again, see if it's all working. As you can see, it actually wasn't working at that time. We'll fix that. Okay, and now what we're going to do is we're going to create a menu. So just so you saw, it wasn't working there because there's no menu yet, so I'm going to introduce a menu. We just take the same scene we just had and just resaved it, basically duplicate it, and then deleted some minor things, set up a camera, added some mountains in the back, and then we'll create a UI for the menu. So as you can see, I'm just trying to reposition it to make it look unique, and left the presents in, leaving the trees in, and then create a menu. Not going to cover this menu very much because I've covered it in so many other videos. I also use this fancy wooden GUI, which is free, so check that out. It'll be in the game as well. I have credited the creator. And skipping through the menu, because like I said, covered it so many times, I'm not going to cover it again. But I basically create a bunch of different pages for this menu, and I'll be able to switch between them. So credits, settings, and then obviously you got the game. So create script obviously for the main menu. I already created it in the past, but basically edit it to make it so that we can open these little individual pages and then test out. So testing it out, come in here, can still hide. So I know there's a lot of testing that happened during this process, of course. So this was a proper test, I think. There we go, we've now found them. I also fixed it so that now the other screen is available and you can see. Now with all that working, what we're going to do is we're actually going to create a new script, which is the throw projectile. So we want the child to be able to throw the projectile, which we haven't done yet. We've only done the damage, which needs a little bit of tuning in a minute. But basically we have our throw projectile. This is what it looks like. It's very, very simple. It spawns a projectile that's going at a certain speed and is going in a specific direction, and it has a time of which you can continuously shoot it. So there's I've set it so that you can only shoot them at a specific amount of time. Then I do some settings, make sure I've sorted it out. Obviously it's moving a little bit too slow now, so that's one of the things to change here. So I make it a little bit quicker, try it out. So the hider hides, the seeker then appears, and we can now shoot our projectiles. Hopefully you can see that. And I do a little bit of a test here, like as I try and play it out a little bit more, and then I find it and then I start shooting. So hopefully you can see that I am shooting the projectile. Obviously this footage is sped up, so you can't quite, it's a little bit tough to see, but don't worry. I also fixed the health because there was some issues with it, and I also make it so that the player will get destroyed if they lose too much life. I also brought in some UI of hearts, which you just briefly saw there, because I think it looks better, and made it so that the player will lose hearts as they get hit, as you can see. Now I create some icons for the hiding and for the hider and for the seeker. So one that allows you to open presents, one that allows you to close. The first one was hiding and this one was opening. Then I implement it and then replace those circles that we had, the red circle and the blue circle, and just bring those icons in, bring them closer to the health and the recharge bar that we have at the bottom right. Unfortunately didn't get enough time to get that to work, but it's okay because I had to make some sacrifices during game jams, and that's just one of those things. So there you go, it was working. And then back to the menu, I replaced some of the UIs and then move on to this audio. So as you can see, I use the audio manager, again, covered that in separate videos. But basically, this just allows me to control all different audios. I bring all those in and then make sure that they're working. I use a few scripts, obviously the audio manager and the sound script, and again you can check out other videos on that. But basically once that's all set up, the audio is complete, and I use only a select few sounds as well as a taunt, which I used, which I haven't used before, and I think it really adds to that seeking element, the taunt sound effects. Definitely try the game out, and because it's really interesting and fun to try. And then once the sound was done, now what we're going to do is we're actually going to add a little bit of light to the doorway, just so that we can actually see where the door is when we're inside. These are minor things. We also changed the player size, the child size, and add a little Santa hat. Again, these are just little extra things that I just kind of threw together. I also made sure that some of the buildings weren't off the ground and some of the trees, because they were. These are really small changes and really quick things, and that is because we're coming to the end of the amount of time that I had. So the final thing I do in every game jam is I work on the UI for the menu in terms of the controls and the credits and things like that. So that is the last thing I do, and then of course little bits of code changes, that including the round length. And then the very final thing that I do is the UI for where it explains the story, and the rules. And this is the last thing I do. So now that that's all completed and I've showed off what I did for the second day, hopefully it wasn't too quick and you could at least grasp some of it. But basically, this is my second day, and this is just gameplay that's going to be running that shows you what the game is, and it's at normal speed. The other thing I didn't show was obviously the UI at the top, the player 1, player 2, just to make things easier. And as you can see, right now we got the hiding. Icons are able to show you if you're near a present, and then when they hide, it should switch to the seeker. So this was a really fun game jam, and I tried very, very hard. I think I spent something along the lines of 30 plus hours. I got very little sleep. I worked very hard on this, and I really loved the result. There were some things that I just couldn't quite get done. As you can see, I've removed the recharge bar before launch, before actually submitting it. And this was the end result that I ended up with, and I got really good feedback, which I'll go over in a second. But as you can see here, I'm just giving a little bit of an overview of what it looks like. I think the game looks very nice. It looks very Christmassy, which is the theme of it. And right now, you can't hear this, but so I do highly recommend that you do play it yourself. But right now, currently the player 1, who is the hider, is taunting, which is actually a Sips quote about being too nice. For those of you who are fans of Yogscast, you'll know what I'm talking about. But basically, Sips is shit talking Simon in a wrestling, but being nice, and it's quite annoying. So it's perfect for this type of game, since this is the Yogscast Christmas Game Jam. What you can see here is the player is actually searching around, trying to find the hider, and it's all working. Every time they get near a present, the icon appears once they're close enough, and as you can see, it's actually very, very good. In the end, I did go with more of a first person aspect to it, because I thought that the child was actually blocking the screen too much, so I actually got rid of the child in the end. But the child is still, the gingerbread man with the hat is still there. It's just that you can't, it's more of a first person experience now. So as you can see, I'm just looking around, I'm trying to escape. The controls obviously are different, we mentioned that in the first day, and it's all working. So you'll see, obviously it's just me now at the moment trying to control the game, and I thought that this was a really fun experience ultimately. So now the feedback. So after the game jam that came to the end is submitted it, we ended up with getting feedback and rankings and things like that. Unfortunately, I didn't end up very high in the rankings, which was unfortunate. I didn't actually get that many people to play, and those that did rate me high, but it just there wasn't a whole lot of feedback. That's just how game jams are like, and it's just how it is. But basically, it was a really fun experience nevertheless. The feedback I did get basically commented on things like, it's a really fun experience. If you're stuck in the house and you've got someone who's stuck in the house as well during things like lockdowns, it's really fun to play it with them. It's actually a really interesting and different hide and seek game. So that's something that, and trying to match that different sort of party aspect to it is really fun. And it's a very fun idea to try and contradict these two elements of a competitive, split screen game. And ultimately, the negative feedback, which was very much welcomed, and things that I need to improve on, were things like the fact that maybe you want to do it on your own, have some kind of solo experience, or if it is going to stay split screen, have some kind of AI and more things to jump on, and just in general make it a little bit more expansive on the actual levels, maybe more different levels. But ultimately, this game jam was really fun. I really enjoyed it. Hopefully I'll be doing a game jam very, very soon, and hopefully I'll get to be able to maybe get a bit more feedback on the game. Who knows, we'll see. But ultimately, this has been a great game. It was a great game jam to end the year, and I'm excited to work on more game jams in 2021. So this has been ProTail Dev, and I'll see you next time.